Man, if you thought it took me forever to talk about Donkey Kong Country, Jungle Beat was even more overdue for me. It's a game close to my heart, being the third Donkey Kong game I played ever, even before DKC 2 and 3, which is crazy. And I'll just get this out of the way, this is the only bongo-based game I'm covering. The less said about DK's stint with Good Charlotte, the better. But I will talk about the new Play Control port on Wii, cause I played that one a lot too. I feel Jungle Beat gets overlooked, but it's pretty important in a lot of ways. Off the bat, it's the first game ever to be rated E10 by the ESRB, and I remember that tripped me up when I saw the commercial back in the day, like, rated E what now? But it earns that rating. It is some of the most brutal cartoon violence Nintendo's ever put their name on. DK didn't even need a firearm to pull it off. And yet, Donkey Konga 2 came out after this and still got rated T for mild lyrics. Can I blame that one on Good Charlotte? On that note, let's go back to 2004. The Donkey Kong series was in a weird place. After Rare was bought by Microsoft, DK was without a forever home, hopping from studio to studio. A time the guys at DK Vine call his couch surfing era, which is just the perfect analogy. The earliest whispers of Jungle Beat I could find were in the November 2002 issue of Nintendo Official Magazine. This was right after the Rare buyout, and as they explained who got what in the Great Divide, they also said work on a new Donkey Kong game would start immediately, done by an internal team. That team being Nintendo EAD Tokyo, with Jungle Beat being their very first title. For more dev stories, there's an interview from Nintendo Dream that shmupulations.com translated in July 2023. This interview took place after E3 2004 and featured the game's producer Takao Shimizu and its director Yoshiaki Koizumi. Shimizu was actually director on Donkey Kong 94, an all-time classic, and Koizumi's better known today for his display of HD Rumble with ice cubes. Anyway, when Donkey Konga was announced internally at Nintendo, Koizumi and Shimizu were shown a prototype of the DK bongos, and it was later decided a mic would be added to the controller, which was Miyamoto's idea. And in another classic move, Miyamoto told Koizumi to make a new Donkey Kong action game. As for what kind, he left that up to the devs. From the start, Koizumi had a 2D side-scroller in mind, cause before this he was doing nothing but 3D Marios and Zeldas and wanted, nay, needed to change things up. All these years later, I can only imagine he feels the same way. They noted how games of the era were getting more complex and wanted their game to have simple controls and a seemingly simple presentation, just so people weren't scared off from playing it. Someone brought up the bongos and they thought, hey, that might work, and they put them to the test in fall 2003. There was skepticism at first, but by the end, they couldn't imagine it without the bongos. Koizumi's team wanted a back-to-basics vibe with Jungle Beat, back when games only had a few buttons and could be enjoyed by people of all ages. They intentionally restricted themselves, and it somehow expanded their horizons. All in all, I say mission accomplished because Jungle Beat might understand the word fun better than any other game out there. It's not bogged down by much else, especially not in the story department. This setup makes the original Donkey Kong sound like Lord of the Rings. One day, Donkey Kong wanted to be king of everything, and whatever gets in his way is getting smushed into a fine paste. So, there's an episode of Space Ghost Coast to Coast called Whipping Post, right? Its description on my TV guide says, Space Ghost is angry and he is attacking everyone in his sight. I can't help but compare Jungle Beat's story to that. The Japan-only guidebook has a few more breadcrumbs, like saying DK heads off to the South Seas for this adventure, but it's not much. They also refer to him as the King of Kings. I'm just gonna leave it at that. On the topic of stories, I have a unique one to share on getting this game, and I stress every word of it is 100% true. On Saturday, August 9th, 2008, one of my uncles took me, my brother, and our cousins to Canada's Wonderland for the day. The weather was getting bad though, and when we got there late in the morning, we were rained out. As we checked the radio for weather updates, we heard comedian Bernie Mac had just passed away, and I had just recently learned about him from watching episodes of The Bernie Mac Show, so we were all pretty bummed. Getting back to our grandparents, my uncle swung by EB Games and said we could each get a game to make up for the day. In one of the bins, I see Jungle Beat, and it so happened I got a GameCube earlier that May. The 1000-year door bundle for $80 if you're curious, so my brother and I went for that. Later in the day, I open the case and see a disc not for Jungle Beat, but Donkey Konga, but we got that sorted out pretty quick. Still, the GameCube was back home, so I had to wait until Sunday to play it. Adding to why I remember all of this so vividly, well, if you were in Toronto, folks remember that weekend for the Sunrise propane explosion, which happened at 3:50 a.m. on August 10th. My grandparents were like a half-hour drive from Toronto, but I swear I felt the house shake a bit. Getting home, my mom was like, "Did you guys hear about that explosion?" And in the middle of all that lies Jungle Beat, the wildest story I have about a game purchase. Anytime I think about it, I think Bernie Mac, crushed dreams, and Hank Hill's worst nightmare. But getting the Wii version has a little bit of a story too. In May 2009, my brother saw a movie with a relative. The movie was X-Men Origins Wolverine, and he had this huge thing of soda. My brother was told, "You're gonna have to pee during the movie," and he was like, "No, I'm not." So they made a deal, and if my brother could hold it, he'd get a new game out of it. I should stress that he didn't hurt himself, but he pulled it off and nabbed Jungle Beat for the Wii, which we had seen promos for on the Wii's Nintendo channel. Probably helped that it was only $30 too, and discounting Wii Sports, it was our second Wii game after Smash Bros. Brawl. But back to the GameCube, I didn't have the DK bongos, and I was worried if I would be able to play this. Even before the title screen shows up, the game says, "Hey, you might want the bongos," shoving it in your face like a Resident Evil content warning. Thankfully, a controller works just fine, and yes, that learning curve was steep, but we still had a great time, even beating it 100%. Still, play it with the bongos if you can. Getting them years later, it was like playing the game for the first time, but doing it right. Just as God intended. And that's when I also learned these bongos are quite the workout. Jungle Beat is a very physical game. I used the sensor on the side of the barrels instead of clapping like a maniac, but my hands still got sore after 20 minutes. Koizumi and Shimizu even said you could hurt yourself if you played too long, which is why there's a lot of stopping points. Don't play this like your average game. It's more of a workout than the Wii version, ironically, but that port will still have you burning calories. Getting into the game, we start with the opening ceremony. You clap 3 times and then this buzzer goes off, making you think you did something wrong. But then DK assaults your senses, a tree that did nothing to him, and you're off to the races. The goal's simple: get all the bananas, or beats, you can by hitting stuff, finding secrets, and clapping every chance you get. There's also a combo system. Keep it going and watch your beat count increase 2, 10, 20-fold even. Just don't get hit before touching the ground again. The more beats you have, the higher your health and your score, and after 2 stages, you take on a boss. Every kingdom's got one, and they come in 4 varieties: Kongs, Hogs, Rocks, and Tusks, and that happens to be how they rank on my best to worst scale, but none are outright bad. Clearing a kingdom, you get crests to open up more kingdoms. There's bronze, silver, gold, and if you're really good, the elusive platinum. During the banana tally, if you have just enough for a crest, or conversely, just come up short, sometimes the tally stops for a sec before dropping a few more like, It's a little mean, but I love that. Jungle Beat's other claim to fame is just how bonkers it is. It's less about logic and more about fun, wild ideas. The level Iguanagon's Realm is a good example of this. It's the kind of stage that makes casuals go, "Were they on drugs when they made this game?" You're riding a wildebeest in the snow, shooting smiling pineapple bombs at vultures, and the occasional gold one that makes the Donkey Kong noise. Plus, you're avoiding giant snow moles, there's an iguana that sounds like a freight train on the ceiling, and if you hit him enough times, his head comes off. An old review from the guys at CGR Undertow put it best: this game is all about what you're doing, not why you're doing it, but I do love this crazy world. It's unlike anything DK had been the past decade, which at the time was kinda scary. Aside from DK himself, barrels, and the banana, there is nothing here from games past, not a reference in sight. During this era, studios like Namco and Payon were using stuff Rare created, and Rare themselves were making the Donkey Kong Country remakes on Game Boy Advance, but this was DK's first big console adventure since DK64, made in-house by Nintendo. I can see why some people were worried if this was gonna be the future going forward. I was removed from all that in 2008, but I still tried to squint and say, yeah, that's from Donkey Kong Country. Those are neckies. Those are weird zingers, right? The Mario Wiki once said these armadillos were armies, and even I thought, no, you're reaching. Side note, I love these armadillo guys because they just go, "Ay," like they're the fawns in Happy Days. These changes were explained in a Nintendo Online magazine interview with a rather infamous translation by defunct Nintendo fan site and IGN affiliate Insider. Koizumi apparently said the DKC cast wasn't fresh enough for this game, which combined with Jungle Beat's clean slate approach, that's a harder 1-2 punch than anything DK's packing. But this quote was retranslated in 2019, and it turns out he didn't hate DKC at all. Not like how Reggie confessed he hated Donkey Kongo, which, that's fine. Koizumi actually said Jungle Beat had elements never before seen in the series, and was best thought of as its own thing, a showcase for New Kid on the Block EAD Tokyo. You know, the more I think about it, seeing Diddy or Dixie go to town on a warthog or giant spider feels pretty weird. Not that I'd object to that, mind you, and we do get a few DKC nods here. Level 1 has a Jungle Hijinks remix, and the tune pops up throughout the game. That karate yell from Funky's Flights is in the opening ceremony, and I know it's a stock sound, but let me have this. There's also Animal Buddies, or Jungle Buddies, and you can tell exactly who they're standing in for. Except for Flurl, he's kind of an anomaly. There's a few cases where there's two on screen at the same time, and you know, that happened with Ungard in Country 1, so they might have more in common than I thought. You'd think the Underwater Buddy would be Ungard's stand-in, but Orko is more like Squawks in Country 1. Only appears in one stage, but it's a memorable appearance. Not sure if these are Orko's kids either, but I like to think of Orko as a mom. Hoofer's stages are a blast, and I love his minigames too. I wish they made an endless runner mode for this one in particular. The long jump one cracks me up because if you botch it, this happens. And I took that as the game saying, wow man, you suck at this. Hellabird, I'm 50-50 on. Flying feels okay for the most part, but getting through tight spaces is a nightmare. God help you if you've got a big combo going and you didn't make a pit stop. It also kills me how most enemies and items don't have names. Oh, they got names in Japan, but that wasn't a priority anywhere else. For the stuff we did get, there's Iguanagon, Ninjapes, Chopper Bird, which in Japanese is called Birdman. Birdman! And there's also the Gale Hogs, but that name actually comes from a Brawl sticker. The other pigs get nothing. I also tried to find any kind of theming for the enemies, and the best I could muster was, again, all the pigs. These little guys, the big pigs, the ones that throw coconuts, and the hog bosses. The latter two have a similar naming scheme in Japanese, so it's implied they're related. Same for the Rocks and Tusks with their own mini variants. Hellabird also shares a naming scheme with the Rocks, but I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean. Every time I start a level, the first thing I think is, how am I gonna get the best combos going? It's so addictive to try and see how well you can do. Getting footage, I thought, I've already beaten this, I don't need to go all out with my usual setups, but it didn't feel right not seeing all those combo fairies spin around me. And getting into the game's rhythm, man, it is like a sugar high. The higher your combo, the crazier the music gets. You hear guys chanting what sounds like, go, go, go! A whistle starts blowing, people start clapping, the party just don't stop. Unless you get hit. You lose all your beats, the crowd groans, back to reality. Makes me want to start the stage over again, or turn it off and come back later. Thankfully, the levels are pretty short, unless you're looking for every way to increase your score. Jungle Beat's all about replayability, and after clearing a kingdom, there's little hint videos showing how you can improve. The game knows you won't know this stuff on your first go, but that's how they pull you back in. These had me think, I could pull that off, and what if I added another combo to that? I could get even more bananas than what they're showing me. Just don't skip them by accident. I'm still trying to beat my old scores, even if just by a few digits. And just when I think I've got the best score known to man on a stage, I find there's people out there who have doubled it back when the game was new. But I'm not discouraged. The creative thinking here is just insane. I also love all the ways you can kill enemies. My favorite are these bats right here. You just toe punt them skyward and you can hit their buddies along the way. And I know this sounds twisted, but I love the noise they make when you kick them, like pew. It gives me this satisfying feeling that no other game has. And Donkey Kong does all of this with such unhinged finesse. I always thought it looked really cool how he smacked melons back at enemies. And when fighting the hogs, you can smack out 3 at a time and just pelt them back, and they do more damage with each hit. Then you wail on him and the final blow slams on his snout. You could even kill him with a melon if you wanted. Geez, just talking about this game is fun. Occasionally, you'll see this giant DK in the corner, and most reviews I've seen have no clue what this is. What they don't want you to know is they never read the manual because it's explained there. Look at Donkey Kong's expressions and you might find a secret or two. The devs also made the default DK small so you could see more of the stage around you, with big DK conveying all kinds of emotions. I've never found this distracting, so pretty good idea. And I mean, just look at that fur! He wouldn't be this shaggy again until Tropical Freeze. Jungle Beat also used seasoned Japanese voice actors for its cast, and looking them up brought up some cool stuff. Quite a few anime and games you might know yourself. The one that gets me is the voice of Ghastly King. He went on to be King K. Rool and everybody's favorite Funky Kong. Imagine that! But the MVP here is Takashi Nagasako as DK. This wasn't his debut as the Big Ape, that was Mario Power Tennis, which came out a few months earlier, but the games do share a couple voice clips with each other. And I still love Grant Kirkhope's Donkey Kong, which was actually used in Jungle Beat's E3 demo, but Nagasako's energy is so infectious, you'll catch yourself mimicking some of his noises. I mean, I certainly did. This game really makes you feel like Donkey Kong, and I'm not just saying that. I mean, look at Koizumi here. He's literally turning into DK. That personality extends to all his moves and expressions. He is a bona fide cartoon character like Popeye or something. When ice skating, he doesn't backflip, but instead pirouettes, and after sliding down a slope, he dismounts like a gymnast. And when starting a stage, he looks pretty neutral and pleasant most of the time, but in Battle for Storm Hill, he is ready to take on the world. It's the only regular stage that does this, so you know it's serious business. As an aside, this whole kingdom is a standout. There is an honest story being told here. Then you face off against Ninja Kong, and it is such a cool fight. The fake outs, ninja kicks, and that extra cool uppercut with the fireworks. Dude, you should have seen me when I did that the first time. Sumo Kong's fight is a close second. I mean, fighting a giant gorilla in space on an asteroid, how is that not cool? But Ninja Kong slightly edges him out for now. Actually, speaking of Sumo Kong, ever notice he doesn't get a cool silhouette like the other Kongs, and it takes him longer to show up at the end ceremony? I mean, he's a big guy, but I think they're being a bit mean to him. Just felt like I had to mention that. To bring up this game's soundtrack, done by Mahito Yokota, it is so good. Bouncy, high-energy stuff with lots of catchy melodies. Monkey Fest, Magma Coliseum, Sky Garden, Sweet Paradise, Cactus Mine. But I'll say it again, Battle for Storm Hill is a standout. I'm always happy to see it make the cut in Smash Brothers. Sometimes the music changes up with what's happening on screen, like when you're jumping, you're near an enemy, or going through these dragon things. You can even hear that in later games this team worked on. When I played Mario Odyssey and had Mario go through those electric currents, I was like, oh my goodness, it does the same thing! Seriously, listen! Yeah, you hear that? I'm not reaching, am I? Now, is there anything about Jungle Beat I don't like? Well, sometimes the bongos don't always register my inputs. It might be because my bongos are just getting on there in years, but most of the time it works fine. It got really bad during the Sumo Kong fight though, my goodness, you'd think I'd never played this before. Backflipping is also kind of annoying, the swim controls could be a bit better, non-Kong bosses are a tad repetitive, the final boss is not really tough at all, but man, if he isn't fun to slap around. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Even with what little story there is, it was cool seeing the Kongs come together at the end to celebrate DK's coronation. It's like the end of a play and the cast coming out to take a bow. But we're not done here yet because there's still the new Play Control version to talk about. For those who don't know, this was part of a line of first-party GameCube titles ported to the Wii with motion controls, but Jungle Beat got special treatment. It's the only game in the lineup with all new content. Among them is the new story, which just reframes things as Donkey Kong liberating the kingdoms from Ghastly King, who now wants to take over the world. A bit generic, but it's nice they tried something. For gameplay, there's new secrets, obstacles, a new enemy with this sparky little doodad here. The camera's zoomed in more so the giant Donkey Kong is gone, some enemies were cut from levels or from the game entirely. If you're coming from the GameCube version, this'll feel like a weird ROM hack half the time. There's also more elements from Donkey Kong Country in here, and by more, I really mean one. All the spring flowers are now stationary barrel cannons, and while that's cool, they do feel a bit out of place. kinda see what Koizumi was talking about. Donkey Kong can also duck now, and after a while, he'll peek out to see if the coast is clear like in DKC. That's nice, I like that. Compared to the original, this port does some things better and some things worse. A few levels and bosses were rearranged, and that sometimes ruins the theming they originally had going. The Spirit Tree level led right into Mohawk's fight, for example, but now that connection is gone. On the topic of things that only bother me, Hoofer's running animation also looks a bit off, but let's talk about some good stuff. With the new ducking move, backflips are a lot easier to incorporate into combos, and while there are no bongo substitutes, the Wiimote and Nunchuck are still fun to shake about. The Wiimote's microphone also has a ton of wacky sound effects for just about everything going on. It gave me a little shock the first time, but I like it. Something I don't like is how they changed up the sound wave attack. It's now directional instead of having a huge radius. This right here is the only remnant of it left. The clap grab still works, unless you're flying or swimming, where it's totally gone. Now you have to grab bananas one by one like a loser! Enemies are harder to kill as a result and can easily ruin a combo. You also can't gobble up mosquitoes or these balloon dudes for clutch bananas anymore. These demonic rats used to give out so many bananas, but they're cut from the game completely. The game's been changed to accommodate all this, but I still don't like it. It just feels really off coming from the original. They changed up the health system here too. You really had to go out of your way to die in the original, though I gotta say it's hilarious when you do. DK gets sent into the void and audibly screams, "No!" Anyway, now your health is managed by these hearts here. Take 3 hits and you're dead, and insta-death if you fall down a pit or get crushed, but they added extra lives and checkpoints to some stages to offset this. These flowers used to net you 100 beats, but now it's a 1-up, and they are given out in this game like candy, so usually I just ignore them. Bananas are only used in boss fights now, and the bosses themselves are a bit harder. 1 hit from them takes off 100 bananas as opposed to 5 or 10 on GameCube, but that said, killing them is just as easy as ever. For the crests, there's only 3 per kingdom now, and they are all the same boring color. There's nothing cool about this. And I loved how in the original they kept the platinum crest totally secret, but it is so messy on Wii. These wreaths immediately tell you there's 3, but they try to be vague about the last one like it's special. I'll tell ya, nothing will beat that feeling of getting good at the game, getting a high score just to show off, and then a crest fell out of the sky? What do you mean there's more? That's just not replicated here. I do like how Donkey Kong wears a crown though, and when you beat the game completely, it's a permanent fixture. Looks good on him. I already mentioned some of my gripes with the enemy changes, but the one that really gets me is what they did to the dancing panda. His fur got changed to blue. I guess someone at Nintendo didn't want a panda getting smacked, but this is nowhere near as striking and the joke falls flat. You can still see where his old pattern was too. I mean, that's kind of funny. There's also 2 new pseudo bonus levels, a boss rush called Kong of the Mountain and Banana Banquet, a place to celebrate your victory with your jungle buddies that aren't named Orko. Sorry, Orko. Even though some of the spirit was lost in the conversion, this port is still fun. I mean, I beat it 4 times, and back when a traditional Donkey Kong game seemed like a pipe dream, this gave me hope we'd get something one day, and thankfully that was just around the corner. I say play the original first and then give the Wii port a go. Gotta say, it feels great to talk about Jungle Beat after all these years. I tend to say this thing is one of a kind when talking shows and games I like, but this is in a whole other league. There is nothing like Jungle Beat, not even a cheap knockoff. EAD, now called EPD Production Group Number 8, rolls right off the tongue, went on to make bigger and better things, but I'd love to see them take another crack at Donkey Kong, be it a sequel to this or something new. The game's been referenced a few times in other titles, namely Super Smash Bros. When I saw them change Donkey Kong's Final Smash to this in Ultimate, I flipped out! In the DK series itself, Returns and Tropical Freeze used 2 of its fanfares for beating levels and finding all the puzzle pieces. You know, I never understood that. Were those just placeholders that they forgot to take out? Or did they just really like Jungle Beat? If you've been on the fence about trying it out, I say get off it already. It's not the best game ever, but it might just be the most fun game ever. It should be in the dictionary when describing the term. Getting right down to it, that's what games are all about, big shocker. And given we're still talking about it today, that's pretty awesome. I hope the Jungle Beat team looks back on their work and thinks, man, you sure we weren't on something when we made this? Thanks for watching, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, feel free to give this video a like, share with a friend, subscribe, check out my social media pages, my Patreon page for more extra goodies, and if you want to help support me even further. All that stuff I always go on about. Speaking of the Patreon, I have to give a shout out today to Lars Niswant for his support. Thank you so much. It really means more than you know. And if you've got memories with Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, be it the GameCube version or the Wii one, or maybe both, feel free to share them in the comments below. I'd love to read them. And while you're here, check out some of the stuff I got on screen. I enjoyed making them. Hopefully you'll enjoy watching them. Maybe I've got an interview with a really cool person up here. I don't know, but if I do, I'd recommend listening to those too. Next time we meet on this Kong-a-thon, well, you know what I'm gonna talk about, right? Right? Come on now. And with all that said, I will see you guys next time. Later.